Canadian Margot Kidder has received much critical acclaim for her acting abilities, but more recently she's come under fire for her outspoken opposition to the Persian Gulf War. She's currently in Toronto as part of a peace team made up of mothers of servicemen and women serving in the Persian Gulf. Margot Kidder joins us now in the studio. Your tour that brings you to Canada and will also take you through parts of the United States is called the Madre Tour, which is Spanish for mother. Tell us a little bit about the Madre Tour, where you're going, what you're hoping to accomplish.
Well, the Mother Courage Tour is a tour of mothers who either have someone serving in the Gulf War or have family in the countries involved in the war. There was much shock when I announced at the Madre office that Canada was in fact also in the war, and everyone went, no, not Canada. I guess on the basis of the belief that human beings killing other human beings is a very stupid way to solve human conflict, and a sense of urgency for the children and the mothers of the sons serving overseas, we decided that it was best to have a consciousness-raising tour around the United States and Canada to put a human face on this war where the media has basically been Pentagon-controlled, so that we feel somehow that no one's dying, no one's getting their arms and legs blown off, no heads are being blown off, that somehow this is all about surgical strikes. And so each woman's going to be speaking out from her point of view. Coming to Canada will be an Israeli woman, an Iraqi woman, a Palestinian woman, Canadian, English, French, and American, and they'll be here on the 2nd and 3rd of March. And the night of the 3rd of March, we're having a huge benefit at Young People's Theatre in Toronto. And
you'll also be going to Washington and New York City for International Women's Day on the 8th?
Yes, to lobby various politicians and to lobby people at the UN. Who capitulated to the American lobbying for this war.
Now, you were saying when you mentioned to people who were involved in the tour that Canada's involved in the war, and they said, oh my goodness, not Canada. You see that as being a dichotomy with our traditional role as peacekeepers?
Yes, it broke my heart. Canada has such a wonderful traditional role as a peacekeeper and is seen by the world as such. And I don't think, I think we had such an opportunity for standing up and going, no, we were not going to go and send people to die for the large oil companies and for the weapons manufacturers. And in standing up, Canada would have had great influence, perhaps not on the politicians or the Dick Cheneys and the Bakers who are running this war, and let's not delude ourselves into thinking that anybody else has any say in it except the Americans. But they would have had an effect on the population of the United States and perhaps been able to break through this propaganda that we've been receiving that in fact has made most people believe this is about the liberation of Kuwait, which it's not at all.
You don't buy that argument at all? I mean,
well,
there are some people who, there are many people who say that if they didn't attack Saddam Hussein now to wreck his army, to get him out of Kuwait, that they'd be fighting an even worse war 5 years from now that might include nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I think that's, this one might include nuclear weapons. The United States has 1,200 nuclear warheads over there.
Not to use them.
No, they have pledged they will possibly use them. In fact, quite the opposite to what you said. As has Israel said they will use it if they have to. I think in making this about the liberation of Kuwait, they've been very clever. Most people are moral and good, and so they've appealed to the moral goodness in people and said, you're fighting a moral war. And so people will naturally rise up and go, oh gosh, we've got to come to the side of those poor people in Kuwait. Well, in fact, Kuwait has 1,600,000 people. 40% of them are Kuwaiti. Perhaps 2,000 of that 40% have any say in how the country's run. Their human rights abuses before the Iraqi invasion, as documented by Amnesty International, were horrific, as were those of our allies, Syria, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Israel has several blights against it in terms of the West Bank.
The United States itself now is on Amnesty International's hit list.
Yes, we're adopting at Amnesty prisoners of conscience, those thousands of people who are going AWOL and getting put in jail in the United States.
Let's talk just a little bit about you. You have an enormous number of supporters behind you, but you have just as many, if not more, people who are against you. You've received hate mail. Articles in New York newspapers have called you the idiotic Baghdad Betty. I mean, how are you dealing with this backlash against you? They're seeing you as the Gulf War's Jane Fonda.
Well, it was very difficult, and very difficult for my daughter as well. But what was wonderful about it was that along with that mail was an inordinate amount of positive mail being supportive. And all of it said something really interesting, or a lot of it. It said, I don't have the courage to stand up and say that I'm against this war because I'm afraid of my neighborhood's feelings or the repercussions when I go to the corner grocery store.
So why do you stand up?
But secretly, I'm behind you. Well, frankly, I just assumed everybody could figure out that this was going to war for the price of oil and for American domination of the Middle East, the Middle East oil-producing countries, was a really immoral reason, an insane reason, an unnecessary reason for killing thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And so I just stood up.
Well, you've been an activist before. You're
Yes.
with Amnesty International. You were involved in the California nuclear freeze movement of the early 80s. But I mean, you've put your career on the line here. There's a possibility that you will, as Elizabeth Ashley once was, be smelly fish in this industry, as she put it, for years to come.
Well, that seems irrelevant in the face of all this slaughter and dying, frankly.
You have to eat.
I will eat. I'm very resourceful. I think that what's important is that if one person stands up, there's an example for someone else to stand up, and it is united we stand, divided we fall. Someone else gets the strength from me standing up, and gradually there are more and more people. I know how many people are violently opposed to this war, including many, many U.S. senators who haven't stood up, that they're too frightened to do it in public, but behind closed doors they go, no, it's a horrific. Sanctions were working so wonderfully well that there is considerable evidence to point to the fact that it was in America's best interest, in fact, to use their military might. They can no longer control the world economically because the Defense Department, let me finish, spent so much money during the Reagan years that America became bankrupt. So it can't control the world economically, but now it's trying to prove it can do it militarily. And what we can do, even though probably we can't stop this slaughter, it's well on its way and hopefully, God willing, coming to a finish, but we can stop and say no to the American policy which brought us into it, which is we will control the world now militarily. We have the largest military machine in the world, and God forbid any other country should stand up to us.
I got to get this in quickly. You only have a few seconds left. One of the casualties of the anti-war campaign in Vietnam were the soldiers themselves. They came back, they were ridiculed, they were spit on. Do you want that to happen again?
No, it was one of the lessons of Vietnam, besides the lesson that we should never have fought it in the first place, was the lesson that one does not blame the soldiers for the policy. One honors and respects them. They're over there. They feel they're fighting for their country. They have been given the same load of BS everybody else has about why they're fighting this war. And no, you certainly don't. You give them the respect and honor their due.
Well, let's hope that comes to pass. Margot Kidder, thanks for being with us today. 19 minutes after the hour, Canada AM will return right after this.